Me about the TV shows that we have in development for Lock-In and Old Man's Gore and Red Shirts.
Wow.
I know, right? There was a Kermit. I did promise a Kermit flail. Would you like the Kermit flail now? Because we, the thing about the Lock-In thing is, I knew about the news last Friday, but I couldn't talk about it. And then I was at the event last night, and as it was happening. During the signing, someone said, "Oh, congratulations about the Lock-In deal." I was like, "How did you know?" And they were like, "Because it's on the Twitters." And I'm like, "So, because Variety picked it up." So I was like, "All right, then I can tell everybody." So I like stood over from where the line was, like, "Hey, everybody's still in the line. You know, I have another TV deal. That's awesome. Woo! All right, I'm gonna sign your book some more." And so I never had the proper moment to actually do a celebratory thing. So. Get your cameras ready and tell me when you are prepared. But anyway, to continue the schmiel, so you can ask me about any question you want, and I will answer any question. Sometimes the answer will be, "I can't believe you asked that question. You're a terrible person. Please leave and never come back." So, as long as they're clear, then we'll take any questions. So are we ready for the Kermit flail?
Yes.
Okay. Ready? That's so going up on YouTube. It's going to be on your site. No matter what else goes up on the site tomorrow,
It'll be in a loop.
There we go, the Scalzi jet. So, seriously though, questions? Anyone? Raise your hand. Start with you.
Any desire to do a follow-up to Shadow War of the Night Dragons? Probably the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Shadow War of the Night Dragons, Book 1, The Dead City, Prologue. Yes. No. That was such the weirdest thing, right? Because they contacted me, Tor contacted me, and they said we want to do this April Fool's thing, and I said, all right, I'm certainly happy to do that, and so we did Shadow War of the Night Dragons, Book 1, The Dead City Prologue, which is, which was hysterical to write because it was intentionally bad writing, but it was intentionally bad writing that you had to keep reading, which is actually a little more difficult to do than you might suspect. And it really took a life of its own. I mean, we put it out there and they're like, "We got a 3-book deal, Shadow War of the Night Dragons." And the reason that it was called Shadow War of the Night Dragons, just in case you didn't know, was that Tor did a thing at the a few years ago where they did a statistical analysis of the titles of all science fiction and fantasy books and figured out what the most common words were in each of the titles, in all of the titles. So, shadow, number 1, war, number 2, night, 3, dragons, 4. And so they said, if you were going to name the most successful science fiction / fantasy book of the next 10 years of the 21st century, it would be Shadow War of the Night Dragons, Book 1, The Dead City. All of these in order of their actual popularity. So they put that article up, and I was immediately there with typing up a response, and my response, I think, was the first response. It's like, "I will write that for you, Tor. Please back up the money truck." And then Tor, and then Irene Gallo, who is the editor of Tor.com, and says, "I so want this to happen." I was like, "All right, I will do it for you, but I have demands. The first is, of course, the money truck. Number 2, I want a robot butler. Number 3, I want a lifetime supply of pony glitter. That's my lifetime, not the pony's lifetime." So I had all these demands, and then they call me up and they're like, "We would actually like you to write, as an April Fool's prank, this Shadow War of the Night Dragons." I was like, "All right, but the demands are still in play." I didn't get the sparkle glitter and I didn't get the robot, but they did send me a truck full of money. It was a Tonka truck, but, so we did it. And the thing is, of course, it comes out on April 1st, and like 98% of people get it, right? They absolutely get it. It's like, it's April Fool's, it's an April Fool's joke. Got it. But then there's the 2%. And they were like, "This is terrible. This is really that first sentence, it's run-on. It's a run-on sentence. uses the word black 11 times. And the third sentence is, it was a dark and stormy night. So they didn't quite get it. And it's like, and there's nothing you can do. If people can't figure out it's April 1st and it's not serious, then you just kind of let it go. But there were actually a couple of people who didn't get it. And some of them were like serious people. Like one of them was, someone was like, hey, I wanted to interview you. Would that be okay? And I was like, cool. And I was like, can I email you the interview questions? And I'm like, absolutely. So he emails me the interview questions, and like question 1 is, you're transitioning away from science fiction into fantasy with your 3-book deal for Shadow War. And I was just like, I need to send these questions back to you, and here is why. So I thought, okay, that is my guy doesn't get it, right? I thought that was going to be the thing. And then my agent calls me, and he says, are you sitting down? And I'm like, no. He says, sit down. Okay, I'm sitting down. What is it? He says, that April Fool's thing, Shadow War of the Night Dragons, that you did? And I said, yes. And he says, there's Hollywood interest. He's a producer, and he's a big producer, and he produces these things, these movies about a boy wizard with a scar, and he says, we would like to see the galley of Shadow War of the Night Dragons. What did you tell him? What did you say? And he's like, I told him that it was an April Fool's prank. I was like, you fool! We could have written this all the way. 7 movie series, Shadow War of the Night Dragons, Christmas 2016. So, I didn't fire him. But yeah, I mean, and then the next year we did the prank where we said it's going to be a manga, right? And some people fell for that again. And then the next year we did Shadow War of the Night Dragons, the musical, Shadow War! Exclamation point. And wrote this whole story up where, it was me going insane with Paul and Storm as my musical collaborators, and they created this, musical thing. And again, you would be looking at it as like, you should know it's April 1st. This is a joke that we've been running for 3 years straight. And so there were some people who's like, I cannot wait for that musical. So cannot wait. And so the real joke would be for me to actually write Dragons and have it released and have just people stare at it in the bookstores like, if I touch it, it's going to explode. That's exactly what's going to happen. You can't fool me a 4th time.
I want to see if you keep that up for 300 pages.
Wait, no, you can't.
Would you want
That
to?
is the thing, which is that you get to there was 3,000 words, and at the end of 3,000 words, I'm like, I'm so tired. Because it's so hard to do, and then trying to do that for another 97,000 words or something like that is crazy. I ended up doing Red Shirts, which was somewhat farcical, but it was slightly different humor. But yeah, that particular kind of humor is actually very exhausting. And it really is meant to be, I mean, there's a reason why Monty Python was a sketch show, where it's like 3 minutes and out, because there's only so far that you can take a joke before, and now, non sequitur, moving on to the next one, right? And so I think that's part of what does it there. The ultimate joke about it, of course, it was nominated for a Hugo, right? Which was, I'm sitting there on my couch, and then I get bing, an email, and it's the Hugo committee, because the Hugo committee sends you an email about whether or not you want to actually accept the award or not. And I'm like, oh, because Fuzzy Nation was the book that came out that year. I was like, oh, maybe Fuzzy Nation got a nomination. That would be awesome. And I opened it up, and it's a nomination for Shadow War of the Night Dragons. And I'm like sitting there on the couch, and I'm literally and I start laughing hysterically, and I get up, and I start going, my daughter's like, you've gone irretrievably insane. How did you find out? She actually said that. And I'm like, no, I will be fine. And so it was nominated that year, and some very serious people, gave birth to some very serious bricks. Like, you gotta be kidding. And I will not lie, I was relieved that it did not win, because particularly in the particular field that it was nominated, there were much better stories that deserved to win, and Mr. Liu won for that year, and deservedly so. But it was fun to be nominated, because in fact, like I said, even at 3,000 words, making it intentionally bad, but good enough to read and make people wake, oh, I don't know if this, I could pot, oh, you're hurting my brain. That actually, if you think that's easy, go ahead and do it. So, next question.
You were talking about red shirts, which I loved and thought had a great humor to it, and I wonder how that would translate into a television show. Not that it's a one-trick pony or anything, but
Oh, come on, you can say it.
it's got a certain, literary sense to it that I just don't know how well that translates, since it's sort of mocking some of the classic science fiction television shows. So, what are your thoughts about translating that into a TV show or a movie?
Well, the short answer is that it's not going to be the book. I mean, no matter what, there's going to be some adaptation to it, and it's going to be a mini series, in fact. So it's going to be about 10 hours. They're not going to make a series out of it like season 7. They still haven't figured it out, because really, by that time you're just like, dude, you just deserve to die. So it's meant to be, a good 8 to 10 hours in and out, and do that fine. And I think in that sort of time frame, you can actually play with that structure that is in the book. Now, one of the things that I tell people with any of the books that are being adapted, because like I said, the Old Man's War and Red Shirts and Lock-In, is that they will be adaptations, which is that they will not be the book. The book is never going to change. When people say, well, are you worried about what they're going to do to your book? It's like, no, the book will always be the book. I own the copyright on the book. The book is not going anywhere. But what they will do is that they have a commitment to actually make it something that's interesting in the medium of television. And so that means that some things are going to be compressed, some things are going to be expanded, some things are going to be chucked out, some things are going to be brought in. It's all going to work in that way. And what hopefully you get is a final product that gives you the same feel that you got when you were reading the book, but not necessarily in the same, with the same exact details. Now, with regard to Red Shirts in particular, I've met with the writers and I know the producers. Ken Kwapis, who is the director-producer in charge of that, he was part of The Office. He did the finale of The Office. This is someone who knows how TV comedy works. The screenwriters have done comedy and done television before. Everybody has a knowledge base, and there are and they have the questions of, well, how do we incorporate in the codas, for example? How do we get the growing realization of the people in the story that they are part of a weird universe and so on. And so these are things that they're taking very seriously, and they're looking for ways to get that into the TV format. Are we going to be successful? I would like to say yes, because I want everything I do to be successful. But we will have to see. I have confidence in each case, in each of the partners that I'm working with. Old Man's War, I'm working with Wolfgang Peterson, who did Dust Boot and In the Line of Fire and Perfect Storm. So, fairly high confidence. And people are like, yeah, but he also did Troy and Poseidon. I was like, shut up. I don't want to hear that. And besides which, those were very financially successful movies. Even Poseidon did well internationally, so shut up. With Lock-In, which is the one that we got to announce yesterday, I mean, that's Legendary Pictures, and they did all the Dark Knight and Chris Nolan stuff, so you're like, yeah, maybe they might know how to do this thing. You always try to, hook up with the people who actually have evidenced competence before. In all of these things, the least competent person involved in the process is me, which I find very, very encouraging. You know what I mean? And I'm not incompetent. I spent 2 years as creative consultant on Stargate Universe. I know how television works. So as far as it goes, I feel very confident about what we're doing. So they're writing the scripts now. I will offer them feedback. I will tell them what I think works and what doesn't, and we'll see how it goes from there. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Too short, you can answer both or neither.
Okay.
One, are you lucky enough to have a wife that shares your sense of humor? I asked that because my wife says I'm funny, but she doesn't find the things that I find funny amusing. So I didn't know if your wife like read your stuff and you know, you say, "Oh, this is great," and she
You're
goes,
trying to trap me, son. You're trying to, this is going to go up on the internet. What do you expect me to say?
For a fee.
For a My wife is the most wonderful woman. She's loving and kind. She would never hurt me. Yeah, now she will. Somewhere in Ohio, my wife's, spousal sense is tingling. She's like, I'm gonna have to kick it. The short answer is yes, she does. She does at least appreciate my sense of humor. But let's be honest, she's not. Her sense of humor and my sense of humor are not 100% aligned. And also, it's also just the things that you learn over the course of being in a relationship with someone and what they find funny and what they don't find funny. For example, when we first started going out, my wife and I first started going out, it's like 3 months into our relationship, I did this thing where, how many of you know who the band The Cure, right? Okay. Lead singer is Robert Smith. And Robert Smith is a miserable bastard. He's just so sad. He's got, bird's nest for all this sort of stuff. And so I did this thing where Robert Smith doing like ordinary things, because you think of him as a rock star, but here's Robert Smith comparison shopping. This kind of peas is 3 cents less than this kind of peas, right? And she laughed, and I was like, immediately my brain said, she laughed at that. Run it into the ground. Robert Smith goes bowling. Robert Smith goes voting. Robert Smith this. Robert Smith. And the thing is it turns out that the joke is only funny once. And we got to the point where I did Robert Smith and Elvis do a duet of the Kenny Loggins Stevie Nicks hit, Whenever I Call You Friend. And she was like, stop it. Stop it now. I love you. But you keep doing this, I will leave you. 6 feet under. And thus was the husband enlightened that some things are only sometimes funny. So that's the whole part of the whole, relationship thing, is that you learn what's funny to your spouse. And it's not that you change your particular sense of humor, like I will still find things funny that she finds incomprehensible, but when I try to make a joke to her, I take into consideration her own sense of humor. And also, the thing is that we've been together for 21 years, married for almost 20 now. It's very rare for me to get her to laugh out loud. I mean, genuinely laugh out loud, because she's been with me for 20 years. She knows all my tricks, right? So, if she smiles, that is the same as you guys laughing. If she goes, okay, that is a hysterical laugh. And if she actually laughs out loud, it means that she has collapsed on the floor and is having a mini stroke. As far as it goes. And so you have to make those adjustments, and all that sort of stuff. So I will say stuff that will make all y'all roll on the floor, and she'll be sitting there going, and then people will be like, she doesn't think you're funny. What do you, why is she still with you? And the answer is obvious. I kill spiders. That is what I kill spiders. I take out the trash. Occasional foot rubs. But the fact is, no, she actually does find me funny. But it's just after 20 years, what are you going to do? And I, her own sense of humor is very, very dry. One of the things that one time, very early on in our relationship, we were doing the what if, like what happens if you were eaten by bears, or what happens if you were abducted by aliens. And I was like, what would you do, honey, if I ever just came to you? By the way, this will never happen. And said I wanted a divorce. And she says, well, I would be very sad, because I would be a widow. She just walks off. The 2 things happen. I was like, 1, so turned on. And the other thing is, I'm just not ever gonna upset her. Because I've never met my wife. She's taller than me, and she's stronger than me. Like, she's freakishly strong just for humans, not just for a woman, but for humans. Like, she's always snapping pins and pulling off doorknobs and stuff like that. So, and she's also just, meet her. And so the other thing is that one day I was, and I always try to keep on her good side because you're supposed to do that anyway. Your spouse should be considerate of the spouse. But the other thing is that one day her tolerance will run out of me. And she and her entire family of closed-lipped German Mexicans would just get on the phone going, "Berrien needs doing." Right? I'd drive up in my car and there'd be a line of blousers with shovels. Pull me out of the car and I'd be like, I don't know what I did, but I certainly deserved it. They'd bury me alive. And then at the next reunion, they'd be like, someone would say to her, the next family reunion, it's like, didn't you used to have a husband? Used to. Whatever happened to him? Couldn't say. Which is different than don't know. But seriously, I love my wife. She's the most perfect woman. Actually, I do seriously love my wife, and she seriously is the most perfect woman. Well, I don't know whether you guys know this. I met my wife, I was in the old-fashioned way. We met in a bar, and I was following around a DJ because I was a newspaper reporter. It was Day in the Life of a DJ feature story, and the DJ was there, putting CDs into the player, and was like, okay, fine. As long as I'm here, I might as well dance because I'm one of the few straight white men who can dance while completely sober. And she saw me on the dance floor, okay, and said that man dances like he doesn't care that what anybody thinks. I like that. Not necessarily the dancing, but the attitude. So later on, I'm standing up against the wall, and I have my my drink in my hand, and up comes literally the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my lifetime. And as a context, at the time I'm a newspaper reporter who was doing movie reviews and interviewing movie stars, so I have a fairly high baseline. But it's like, oh my God, this woman's come up to me, and I'm like, if I didn't have my back up against the wall, I would be looking behind me to see who the lucky bastard was, right? And she comes right up to me and she says, "You and I have to dance sometime tonight." And I said, "Now is good." I put my drink down, and we went onto the dance floor. It was The Cure, Friday on Love. And we danced, and then later on, after we danced a couple more times, and she left with her date, who was a loser, and went and danced. And I gave her my card and then said, "Call me, I would love to have, a real, actual date with you. Let's do this again." And she says, "Fine." And then she waits 3 weeks to call back. Because she's evil. She tells me later it's because she had some things she needed to clear out, mainly the guy she was dating. But within 3 weeks, and I was like, oh my God, I will never hear from this woman again. And I'm not exactly lighting the world on fire with social life because I'm a nerd. And and I thought that maybe I gave her somebody else's business card. Maybe I used somebody else's law of conservation of dates. There's only so many dates in the world. Somebody is having my date. But then she calls me, and I pick up the phone, and she's like, "Hi, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Christine." I'm like, "Oh yes, the beautiful brown-haired girl I danced with 3 weeks ago. How are you doing?"
Why did you wait so long?
No, I didn't. It was implied. It was in the subtext. I'm alone. Please take me. So we go on the date, and that was June 15th, June 16th, 1994. I proposed June 15th, June 16th, 1993, proposed June 15th, 1994 in my newspaper column. And we were married June 17th, 1995. And 7 years later, our daughter has been born. She's 3 years old. We're living in Ohio. And I was telling my wife, I was like, I knew 3 months in that I wanted to marry you, right? And she was, because that's very, very quick for a guy, because I don't know if you know this about guys. Guys are idiots. And one of the things that we do, no matter what relationship we're in, we will be with the perfect person, and there's some part of your brain that goes like, yeah, she's great, she's perfect. Could you do just a little bit better? And that's why guys who are idiots will break up with a woman or whomever who is absolutely wonderful for them, and then 3 months later realize I made a terrible mistake, and come back. So about 3 months in, I was like, this is awesome. She is awesome. My life is awesome. Everything is great. And some part of my brain was, yes, but couldn't you just shut up? You shut up right now. All the rest of my brain said, you don't ruin this for the rest of us. It will never get better than this. And so 3 months in, I knew that was it. I was going to marry this woman. And I told her, I was like, I knew 3 months in I was going to marry you. And she gave me this look. And then she turned to her mother, who was there, and she says, "Tell him what I told you when I came back from our first date." Ooh, she came in the house and she said, "I had met the man I'm going to marry." And I, married 7 years, daughter 3 years old at the time, went, "Ah! Because that's crazy." And I said, "It's a good thing you didn't tell me that at the time." And she says, "Of course I didn't tell you. What do you think I am, crazy?" But in fact, so it turns out that I was reeled in, and I'm like, woo! Thank goodness, because I was doing terribly on my own. So anyway, what was the second part?
Second question is, what is your favorite form of procrastination when you need to write?
Nice guy.
Jesus, why hasn't this already been written? Please, I don't ask for it very much, but please just make this appear.
Family audience.
Yeah, probably Twitter at this point. Twitter is an attractive nuisance. It's just really the way it is, and quite seriously, I'm in the process of writing the end of all things, Human Division 2, the division, and when I get home, I'm literally going to have to pull the internet out of the wall between the hours of 8 a.m. to 12, because if I don't, I'll just be like, oh, I guess I'll just check Twitter. Oh, I guess I'll just check email. And the next thing I'll know, it'll be 3 o'clock. Right, so that is my favorite procrastinatory thing. 2 more questions and then we got to be done. So you can tell I kind of am discursive. Go ahead.
Locked in the Audible version.
Yeah.
You did 2 different versions. And
Yes, I
I
did.
wonder how that came about.
Because I said to them, I have reasons to want to have 2 different versions, and you should do 2 different versions, and one of them should be Will Wheaton, the other should be Henry Benson. And they said, that's a fine idea. Let's do that. And there is a reason why there are 2 different versions, and I'm being some people have figured it out, and some people haven't yet, which is why, for the people who haven't figured it out, I try not to mention it yet. That a couple of times where I've done Q&A, and people come out right out and blurted it, and then you see other people in the audience going, "And now this is where we rise up and murder you, sir." Do you want to talk about it? I can see you. I have questions for you, sir. Well, when the signing comes around, you can ask me there.
Listen to both?
What?
You're saying to listen to both?
I mean, you can listen to both, but that's not a spoiler to say listen to both. But yeah, there's a reason why there are 2 different versions, and I'm actually very pleased with both versions. And it's been fun to have people learn about it. So, but yeah. So, and then last question here.
Yeah, some of the earlier books are hilarious, and do you have plans to get back and write some more
I
humorous
liked your
stuff?
stuff when it was funny.
I know. I love your stuff. I love all of it. All of it. But I really love the funny
I
stuff.
was about just for one instance, I have the vaguest inkling of what it's like to be Woody Allen. Some differences. Some differences. No, I actually. This is actually something that I really find really interesting. That it's very hard to do humor in science fiction. Not for me, and not for people who are actually funny and want to do science fiction. But it's hard to make a commercial argument for it. It literally took me 8 books and 3 best novel nominations and 2 appearances on the New York Times bestseller list before I convinced my publisher, who's been very supportive, all that sort of stuff. That here's Red Shirts. It is funny. Let's say it's funny. And part of that is to blame. The blame goes directly to Douglas Adams, who is wonderful, by the way. The first time I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I was 12, and I was in the backseat of my friend's car, and his mom's driving the car, and I'm like, I have a real quandary, because if I keep reading this, I'm going to pee myself in the backseat of this car, and yet I cannot stop reading. So that was a problem. I will not tell you how that resolved itself. I think it's best that you just imagine how that solved itself. But the thing is that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was so funny, and it was so perfect, and it was an extinction effect for all other types of humor. Now, in science fiction, your humor had to be hitchhikers like fiction. And the problem with that is that really the only person who could pull that off was Douglas Adams. I mean, here's a fact about Douglas Adams that most people don't know, which is that he is only one of 2 other people besides the members of Monty Python who has ever had credit for a Monty Python sketch. The other is Neil Innes, who is their musical accompanist. So this guy was funny before he was a science fiction writer, right? And he was of a particular type of humor, which was British farce. And we discussed this earlier, how difficult it is to do that sort of humor. And it is very quick and bang and you're done. And the only people who can do that are British farcists. He was one. And after that, they become thin on the ground. Then you have Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman with Good Omens. And then it gets very, very grim very, very quickly. And so humor kind of died a terrible death because people couldn't do the type of humor that people decided science fiction humor was. So when I first got my 2-book deal with Tor back in 2002, I gave them Old Man's War, and I said, well, I have Agents of the Stars too, and it's funny. And they're like, no, we don't want that. You know, because it was, you know, they couldn't sell humor. And it took me, like I said, all that stuff of actually injecting humor into it, but not marketing it as humorous, before they could finally, you know, and then getting actually the Hugo Award for Shadow War of the Night Dragons made it a lot easier for me to make that argument, that look, you can actually do funny and it will work. So, and then Red Shirts came out, it was a huge hit, you know, it won the Hugo, and so now, when people go and try to submit humorous science fiction, and I swear to God I got an email about this just the other day, they get back, we can't sell humor, John Scalzi is the only exception. And I'm like, no, that's not the way, no, and hopefully that's not actually the case. I mean, I would love to see more humor in science fiction. It can be done, obviously. So humor is always going to be part of what I do and what I write. I mean, there is humor in Lock-In. It's much more dry and it's much more situational, and there wasn't a place to do it that was necessarily farcical, but it will always be part of my vocabulary because that's part of what people come to me for. I've only written one thing that was entirely devoid of humor, and that was the God Engines. And I wrote that specifically to let people know that I could write other things, and that knocks people for a loop because they read it, oh, John Scalzi. And they come to me like, I've read your book, The God Engines. Do you need a hug? And I'm like, and they don't know, when I was writing it, I was like, oh, this is so awesome. Everybody's gonna die. So, as far as I go, so yeah, there will always be humor, and I would have more plans to write books that are overtly humorous, because apparently I get to do it and no one else does. And hopefully that will change, because I would love to see more humor that's not my sense of humor. I mean, I think I'm funny. I think I'm funny. Although, of course, if you say to people, oh, I'm funny, then you're not, because, you know, if you have to tell people you're funny, instead of letting them hear you talk and go, you know, you're funny. Then there's a problem. It's the same way, you know, where people go, I'm classy, right? If you have to say that, then you're not. But I do think I'm reasonably funny, but humor is super idiosyncratic. You either like it or you don't, right? Which is why Red Shirts, for all its success, has the most negative reviews of any book I've ever written. Because some people are just like, what is this crap? This isn't funny. Who told you you were funny? You are not funny, sir. I'm sorry for you and for your children and everybody who's associated with you, who has to live with you, trying to be funny. Because you are not funny. Okay. What do you do with that? You're like, apparently I am not funny to you, and that's the way it is. But yes, I will be writing my brand of humor. I hope other people also in science fiction fantasy get to write their brand of humor. And it's not just me, and not just Terry Pratchett, and not occasionally just Neil Gaiman, but that there's a lot of people. Because honestly, Red Shirt shows us that there is a market for it. And I hope that more people get to exploit that. And on that note, I am done talking, and we are going to get to the signing portion. And she here is going to tell you how that's going to get done, and I'm interested myself.
We're going that way.
All right.
There's a
Thank you
table
so
over
much
there.
for coming. Oh, one more thing. I did actually want to say this. I always forget until the very last moment, but it is important. Gibson's bookstore has been wonderful to me. They've been, they have me here. They have lots of authors that are coming in, including Bishop O'Connell, who's local, who will be here next week. The way to show your appreciation for what they do for authors and for the community and for everything they do, buy a book. Doesn't even have to be my book. I'm okay with you buying somebody else's book. But buy a book. I'll sign anything you put in front of me. But in all seriousness, bookstores are really important to the community. Bookstores are kind of, in many ways, a heart of the community, along with libraries, I like to think. And show your appreciation by buying a book. I would really appreciate that. Thank you.